Hearthstone's latest set, Across the Timeways, have had all the cards revealed for it, so I know while I did say I probably wasn't going to do one of these, let's discuss all of the cards. Now, this video will probably end up skipping over some cards and talking about other cards in terms of overall packages if they belong to one, but if there's any cards that I end up skipping over for some reason that you're still interested in, let me know down below what ones they are and why you're excited for those cards in particular. Now, we're going to be doing this in the reverse order of reveals after the neutral cards, meaning we'll be starting with the Warlock cards being the newest ones, and then go from there. Muradin, Unbound, a 9 cost, 8 attack, 8 HP, a dragon. Battlecry at the start of your next turn, set this minion's attack to infinity. There is one home where this can easily fit, which is Quest Warrior. Overall, outside of that deck in particular, this is going to definitely just be a big meme. Then we have Chrono-Lord Demos, which is a 7 cost. With the text, your battle cries, death rattles, hero power, and end of turn effects trigger twice. Now, for Druid, there will be some cards that we'll be going over later that will allow you to cheat this out way easier than turn 7. That's making this card pretty good in that, but you have to find really powerful battle cries and death rattles that you can easily make use in that deck in particular for something like this. But Warlock also does have a card that will also allow you to cheat it out earlier, though you're just going to have to find really good battle cries there. Overall, I think this card has a lot of potential for big combos, and it's something that I can't wait to try out. Now, for the next legendary, it is going to be Chromie, a 6 cost Death Rattle minion. Draw another copy of cards you've played this game. Now, does this have potential? Sure. It allows you to have a little bit consistency for combos, but at the same time, you'd have to use some of the combo cards before. Maybe you could use this as a way to draw into more control tools if you emptied out your hand, or maybe you use it as a kind of late game aggro tool to refill your hand once you play a bunch of cards. Now for the last neutral legendary, Time Lord Nozomu, a 3 cost dragon. With 8/8 stats, rush dormant for 5 turns after you play a card from the newest expansion, awaken 1 turn sooner. This card purely depends on how easy it will be to spam out a bunch of like really cheap cards. I know there are a lot of really cheap spells in certain classes like Shaman, and maybe this could be used as like a early game giant similar to some of the other giants we've seen in the past that saw a lot of play. It just heavily relies on the newest set at the given time. Now for the next card, which is going to be Amber Warden, which is a 8 cost dragon with taunt, death rattle, summon a random minion from the past. Honestly, I don't think this card is that great. It dilutes the pool for Imbue Paladin, along with the next card here, which is Complex Crasher, a 7 cost dragon with Rewind. Battlecry deals 7 damage to a random enemy. We have, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that card. Battlecry, add a random 8 cost minion to your hand at the start of your turns, reduce its cost by 1. This is good if you need a late game minion in maybe an aggro deck, though it does rely on a little bit of RNG. We also have Timeless Casualty, which is a 2 cost elemental. Battlecry, reverse the order of your deck. In Wild, there's some potential, but in Standard, I don't know. Oh, well, Druid might be able to use this given some of the cards. We got Time Machine that has the taunt. Death Rattle, get a random rewind card. Theoretically, this is good, but most of the rewind cards are very RNG based, and this costs a little bit too much. We got Clockwork Rager. Battlecry, gain +1 health for each turn you've taken this game, which costs 5. Now, this is actually weirdly probably the most playable Rager that we've ever seen, but outside of random generation, I don't think this will see too much play. We got Devious Coyote. I guess Wily Coyote is now a Hearthstone card, a 5 cost stealth minion that costs 1 less for each time the enemy hero took damage this turn. Great for aggro decks that are just going to want to slam this down basically for free. Then we got Hourglass Attendant and Divine Shield at the end of your turn. Give all minions in your hand +1/+1. Interesting in combination with the legendary that we went over with earlier, since it is an end of turn effect. I think this one technically has potential, though the 4 cost might keep it out of the meta just because it'll be a little bit slow. We got Time Skipper at the end of each player's turn. Give them a coin. Has the pirate tag and costs 4. Theoretically is interesting if we end up seeing more coin support after the rotation, or maybe in the mini set, given one of the rogue legendaries that we'll be going over later. So the second Draenei printed, since Draenei's were introduced, Valkyrie set the cost of every card in both players' hands back to their original cost. Theoretically, if we had ETC still in standard, this card might see play, but kind of useless outside of that. We got Misplaced Pyromancer, which we still don't know what Shatter does, so I can't really evaluate this until whatever set introduced Shatter. We have Sandmaw, which is a 3-cost 7-attack elemental beast. Really good for Quest Hunter. We got Dangerous Variant, which is a 2-cost minion at the start of your turn. Transform into a random 5-cost minion. Good for Arena. And finally, we have Yesterlock as the last neutral card. At the end of your turn, give your other minions +1 health. Now, I think this card kind of will predict a nerf to the Paladin questline, where it'll only give attack instead of both health and attack, since this is a really strong card for that deck. And now let's get onto Warlock, starting with their Fable card, Timethief Rafaam, a 10-cost 10/10 with Fable Plus. Your deck size is 40, but has 10 Rafaams. Battlecry, if you've played the rest, destroy the enemy hero. Hey, man, it's almost like Warlock keeps getting these instant win condition cards. This is a really cool card. The other Rafaams are going to be Tiny Rafaam, that draws a Rafaam. We have Green Rafaam, that gives Rafaams in your hand +2/+2. We got Murloc Rafaam, that makes the next one cost 3 less. You got Explorer Rafaam, who looks like it's a Reno variant of him that discovers a Rafaam from your deck. You got Warsheaf Rafaam, that gains 5 armor. If you control another Rafaam, gain 5 more. Then you get, I can't pronounce that, so we're just going to say Battlecry, deal 6 damage to all minions that aren't Rafaam. Then you got Mind Flayer Rafaam, which if you're holding another Rafaam, summon a copy. You got Giant, which is reduced by each Rafaam that you've played this game. And finally, we got Archmage Rafaam, who turns all minions that aren't Rafaam into 1/1 sheeps called Baram. So this is one of those cards that I was curious how they were going to make a 10 card Fable card actually work, and this seems like a really good engine. You have a lot of ways to discover other Rafaams from your deck, and we'll be going over a card a little bit later that will allow you to draw into multiple copies at the same time. The other really kind of cool thing about Rafaam in general here is it does mean you will automatically have a lease online. So there's a lot of potential here. It's probably a more consistent way than a wheel, because there are just so many ways to like discount the individual Rafaams. So honestly, really cool card. Now for the other legendary of Warlock, we got Chronogor. Battlecry, draw your 2 highest cost cards. Your opponent draws your 2 lowest cost cards. So, at first glance, I was like, this is a really neat card. It allows you to draw into the Rafaams. However, if you haven't drawn into your lowest 2 Rafaams, then you kind of are going to get a little bit screwed over with that. And a lot of the low-cost cards in Warlock right now are cards that your opponent can easily take advantage of. If you're playing Wheel, this might work, though. Then we also have Divergence, which was one of the first cards revealed. Split a random minion in your hand into 2 halves. Basically makes things like Adm'ral, Warlock a real deck again. All right, because it hasn't been added to Hearthstone, we're going to go with the official reveal on Vicious Syndicate. Rafaam Ladder is the first card, which draws 3 cards of different costs for 4 mana. This is really good for the Rafaam deck, just to give you a little bit more consistency. But because now we're through those, let's get on to the other big package of Warlock, which is the Shreds of Time. These are cards that will shuffle in Shreds of Time into your deck, and whenever you draw them, deal 3 damage to your hero. The first card here is going to be Twilight Time Hopper, which is a 2 mana 4/4 that shuffles 2 in your deck. Then we're also going to have Continuity, a 1-cost spell that gives your minions +1/+1 and shuffles 2 into your deck. We got Tachyon Barrage, which splits 6 damage split among all enemies and shuffles 2 into your deck. We got Fate Breaker, which casts a shred from your deck to gain +3/+3. And then we also have Velcro Drake, which casts a Shred of Time from your deck to summon a copy of this for 5 mana. Now, a sort of aggro-ish variant, but maybe in the mini set we'll see some type of legendary that goes along with all of these cards. This actually plays really well with the other legendary that isn't named Rafaam for Warlock. Overall, though, it has potential for the future, and we do have Hearthstone in standard right now, so maybe between this package and Hearthstone, we'll see like some self-damaging Zoo Lock deck. Now for Mage, starting off with their Fabled Legendary, Azure Queen Sindragosa. If you control another dragon, your arcane spells cost 2 less, and the other 2 cards that you'll be getting if you add her to your deck are Malagos, which if you control another dragon, your arcane spells cast twice. And we also have Azure Oathstone, which summons your dragons that have died this game, which means you can easily just slam down the other 2 cards and resurrect them for 8 mana. However, if you use this in combination with Caligos for a complete family reunion, you'll be able to get all 3 really easily. I know there is a combo that you could even do where you're using buy one, get one freeze as a way to get additional copy of Sindragosa, thus reduce all the arcane spells down to 0 that cost 4 or less, making things like Pocket Dimension really good. We got Alter Time, which discovers 2 arcane spells from the past. They cost 2 less for 4 mana. And the pool is going to be things like Luna's Pocket Dimension, Deck of Wonders, Star Power, a bunch of different draw power cards, Light Show, which could be really fun. A lot of real fun potential for this pool of cards. And since it's a Discover effect, I can't see a world where this one doesn't see play. Another cool arcane card we get is Arcane Barrage, a 3-cost arcane spell that deals 3 damage to an enemy and 2 damage to 2 other random ones, which has a lot of potential because we'll be seeing a little bit of spell damage right here in the form of Instructor, which is a dragon that has +2 spell damage. However, because it is a dragon, you can resurrect it off of the Fabled card. That's making it where you could do a lot of damage by resurrecting this times 2 plus the Malagos and either 1 Sindragosa or 2 Sindragosas. There's a lot of OTK potential in the Mage. We also have Mirrored Dimension, which summons a 0/4 minion with Taunt. If you're holding a dragon, you summon another for 1 mana, which is incredibly strong. Random other cards that we got for Mage are going to be Temporal Construct, Battlecry, deal 5 damage to an minion, draw cards equal to the excess damage. I think this costs a little bit too much for Elemental Mage to actually want to use it. The other Mage legendary is Timelooper Toki, a 4-cost Battlecry, gain 4 random spells from the past. When you play all 4, get another one of her. There are 1,400 cards in total, making it very, very random. However, it would be really, really funny to get something like Ice Block. Overall, outside of memes, I don't think this one will see too much play. Now for Warriors, starting off with their favorite card, Logosh Blood Fighter, a 7-cost, 7 attack, 7 HP minion. Rush Death Arrow, summon a Blood Fighter from your hand. It gains +5/+5 and attacks a random enemy, which means the other 2 also have 7/7 worth of stats. You're always going to get a 12/12 that can potentially hit your opponent's face. The other 2 Blood Fighters are going to have Taunt in the form of Brawl. So we have 2 versions of Brawl. And we also have Valera here, who has Elusive and will give the Blood Fighter that she summons the +5/+5 stats and Elusive, while the other one will give Taunt and +5/+5. Overall, I think technically this has a lot of potential, especially if you find a way to hand buff a lot of cards. But honestly speaking, I think this is one of the more boring Fabled cards that we have seen in this set. Now, for the other legendary for Warrior, we have Chrono-Lord Epoch, which is a 6-cost dragon with the battle cry, destroy all minions that your opponent played last turn. Sadly, while this card is really, really boring, I do think this card has a lot of potential to actually see play. Sure, it does rely on your opponent slamming down a lot of cards, but this can easily be curved out after a brawl, thus making it where they had to refill their board anyways, and that might just end the game in a aggro matchup. We got Gladiator Combat, which is a 5-cost summon a random minion from your deck. Summon a 5/5 Tiger with Stealth for your opponent. This is going to be good for like Dummy Warrior or any of the big taunt warriors. We got Heir of Hereafter, a taunt battlecry gain +2/+2 for each damage minion, and it has the dragon tag for 5 mana. I think it costs a little bit too much to see too much play, but theoretically you could play this and it would be pretty big as long as you find a way to also destroy all of those minions. Then we have Undefeated Champion, Rush Battlecry, fill your opponent's board with a bunch of random 1-cost minions with 13 worth of stats for 8. Honestly, don't think this one will see any play at all. You got Slow Motion, which is one of Warrior's better cards from this set, which is a 2-cost spell that your opponent's cards cost 1 more next turn. Anti-combo, anti-aggro. We got For Glory, a 5-mana spell that draws 2 cards, costs 1 less for each minion your opponent controls. And since we are seeing a lot of cards that rely on summoning cards to your opponent's board, this theoretically has potential, but most of the time you'll play this down and it'll cost at least 3. We got Precursory Strike, a 3 damage spell that if you're holding a minion that costs 5 or more, draw a minion. Pretty good for any deck that just wants to draw additional cards. Then we have Unleash the Crossbowless, which is a 1 mana, gain 10 armor, summon 2/3 beasts for your opponent. Theoretically, this card is really good, but I only think this will see play in Wild with Odin. Now, starting with the Demon Hunter cards, Broxigar, Fabled, Charge, start of game, disappear, kill all 4 demons from Argus to reappear in hand. It also is worth mentioning, I know most people don't care about the Warcraft lore, but this is one of the only mortals to ever wound Sargeras, even if it was a teeny tiny scratch. Now, the other cards that you get for playing Broxigar are going to be Axe of Cenarius, which is a 3-cost weapon. Lifesteal after your hero attacks and kills a minion, draw a portal to Argus. And the first one is going to summon a 1/1 demon for your opponent. And when it dies, draw a card and shuffle the next portal into your deck. And then the other one, next portal, is going to be a 2-attack demon, then a 3, and then a 4. Theoretically, it actually isn't really that hard to destroy all 4 of the portals in the same turn. And you honestly could see this card getting nerfed pretty early on, since I do think this has a lot of potential, even outside of completely dedicated decks for him. We also have the Eternal Hold, which is a 6-cost, 3 durability location. Get a demon that costs 5 or more. If your deck has no minions, your next one costs 0. Now, this is so cool. One of my favorite Demon Hunter decks of all time is no minion Demon Hunter. I really love the Scythe Castle Nathri. I don't. Overall, though, I can't wait to revisit this. These are the demons that are currently in standard. A lot of these have a lot of potential to be quite playable, especially if they cost 0. Some of the other support that will be seen for this deck: Hounds of Fury, summon 2 3/3 demons. If your deck has no other minions, they attack the lowest health enemy. This is basically just a better Furious Fowls, but for Demon Hunter. Then we have Lasting Legacy that gives your hero +4 attack this turn. If your deck has no minions, give any in hand +4 attack. Theoretically, if you can somehow sneak an Inquisitor into the list or generate the Inquisitor, this is quite potent. We also have Solitude, discover a minion. If your deck has no minions, reduce the cost of any in your hand by 2. Generally, this is just a really strong card, and there's no world where this doesn't see play. Aeon Red, a rewind spell for 4 mana that deals 4 damage to 2 random enemies. Can't hit the same enemy twice, making it probably unplayable. And now for the most hear me out card of the entire set, Timeway Warden. A 4-cost Battlecry minion, imprison an enemy minion. It goes dormant for 10,000 turns. Death Rattle, it awakens. Now hear me out. Theoretically, if you can bounce this card back, you can lock your opponent out of minions for the rest of the game. You just have to bounce it back 7 times and keep on doing it as long as they keep slamming down minions. Is it going to be a winning strategy most of the time? No. Is it going to be funny? Yes. Will I try to do it pretty early on? Probably, maybe. We'll see. Now for Rogue, starting with Garona. which is their Fabled card. Battlecry, if your opponent is holding King Lane, destroy him and cut their health in half. Theoretically, the most amount of damage this is going to do is 15. And because you can't randomly generate any of the Fable cards, this probably doesn't have too much potential. You might be wondering, how are they going to be holding King Lane? Well, King Lane, at the start of the game, hide from Garona in the enemy's deck. Battlecry, draw a card, shuffle this back into your deck, which means this card will always go back into your opponent's deck and give them a little bit of advantage, but also hurt them because it hurts their consistency. And how you're going to force them to draw into it is the King Slayers. After your hero attacks, both players draw a legendary card. However, honestly speaking, out of all of the Fable cards, I don't think that's enough to want to run something like this. Some of the other support that will be seen for this deck are Loyal Informant, Battlecry, look at the rightmost card in your opponent's hand, either get a copy of it or increase its cost by 2. While this deck is probably meant for the Garona list, this is probably just going to be a pretty good hand controlling card versus any combo type of deck. We also have Shapeshifter, which is a 1-cost minion that each turn this is in your hand, transform into a random minion in your opponent's hand, making it a better Merrick's, which is a legendary that Rogue just got, but it does give a little bit of information to know if your opponent has King Lane or not in their hand. Overall, I don't think this card will probably see any play since I think this package is quite. Deja Vu, discover a copy of a card in your opponent's hand. It costs 1 less for 1 mana. This is probably the most potential out of that entire package. One of Rogue's best cards, however, is going to be Fast Forward. Draw 2 cards, pick one to have its cost reduced by 2. Mana cheat is always good. This is 2 mana if you have preparation, and most Rogue decks run preparation. Even though, sadly, it does demonstrate a card that was printed a little bit too late. Time Adm'ral Hooktail, Battlecry, summon a 0/8 chest for your opponent. It's full of coins, which fills your opponent's hand, aka you, with the coins when you destroy it. Overall, if this was printed last year, which wishing well in rotation, I think this card will see a lot of play, but it does have potential after rotation if they rotate some of those cards back. Now for Shaman, starting with Muradin, High King, 5 costs. Minion with Fabled Rush Battlecry, bring the High King's hammer to me. Death Rattle, add it to your hand. Now, this does explain why we didn't get any weapons this entire year out of Shaman. The High King's hammer is going to be a Wind Fury weapon with the Death Rattle Shaman. Shuffle this into your deck with +2 attack permanently, which means if you somehow slam this down before you do your High King, you'll theoretically allow this to be a 8/6, but baseline Muradin will be a 6/6 and get your win condition to your hand, which you can then buff up even more using things like Avatar Form to give your hero an additional 2 attack while also making him do a little bit of AoE. Or you can use things like Sand Art Elemental to do even more. Overall, I think this has a lot of potential, especially given some of the other support, starting with Static Shock, which is a 0-cost nature spell that deals 1 damage to a minion. Give your hero +1 attack this turn. This card is probably one of the cards that I would expect to have the highest chance of getting nerfed really quickly. 0-cost spells are always either incredibly broken or at least playable. I can't name a single one right now that don't fit one of those two categories. There are other cards such as Thunderquake that deals 1 damage to all minions and then gives you additional static shocks, making it very much easier to OTK with your hero's weapon. But if you really wanted to, you could even use these static shocks on your own minions, such as Storm Rook. Whenever you would damage this with a nature spell, summon a random 5-cost minion instead, which is just a really good way to swarm the board. For goofy rewind cards, we have Instant Multiverse, which is a 6-mana card that summons 12 mana worth of random minions. Overlord 3, I don't think this is playable enough to see any type of play. And we also have the other legendary for Shaman, which is Farseer Wu, which is elusive after you cast a nature spell, discover a nature spell from the past. Theoretically, this could be cool, but the pool is pretty big for the nature spells that you possibly could get with a wide variety of different potential. Now for Druid, we are going to be starting off with Queen Azshara or Lady Azshara in this form. Fable, choose one, empower Zin Azari or the Well of Eternity. The other gets destroyed. Zin Azari is a location that summons a copy of a friendly minion, basically making this a better Elise for Owl Druid. And then you also have Well of Eternity, which fills your hand with random temporary spells. The upgraded version of Zin Azari will double the stats, but the upgraded version of Well of Eternity will make these spells cast twice. Now, this is going to sound a little bit weird. Honestly speaking, most of the time, you probably aren't going to want to upgrade either of them. You're probably just going to want to use both locations as much as humanly possible, especially in Owl, since you can get additional copies. However, you could slam down an Owl, but also have Zin Azari on the board, thus making it where you slam down Azshara and then you destroy Zin Azari to empower the well and get double damage off of all the random spells. Overall, I think this card has a lot of potential, but sadly, it's in a pre-existing Druid list. However, the other package in Druid that they'll be getting is going to be a Dredge-like mechanic with Krona, Keeper of Eons, Taunt, Battlecry. Set the cost of the 5 bottom cards of your deck to 1 for 6 mana. The first thought I had with this card is Low Druid. Since theoretically, if you can put low at the bottom of your deck, all your minions are going to cost 5. Sure, it is a little bit anti-synergistic with this card, but honestly, just being able to spam out a bunch of giants for free makes this card quite strong. We also have Wave Shaping, a nature spell that discovers a card from your deck. The others get put at the bottom, thus making it easier to stack your deck like that. Then we got Contingency, which draws the bottom 2 cards from your deck, which then allows you to draw into the mana discounted minions off of Keeper. Honestly, this looks like a very interesting way to maybe build something like that. Speaking of Aldruid, another interesting card for that deck is going to be Ebb and Flow, which deals 3 damage for 2 mana. And if you've played a minion while holding this, gain 5 armor. Just the little bit of extra damage that Al might be missing, while a little bit of survivability as a backup plan. In the flavor of Announced Darkness and similar cards, we have Altered Reality, which replace your hand and deck with random choose one cards from the past. They cost 1 less. Theoretically, this could be really cool since we do also have Staghelm in standard, I think, right now. Though this card outside of memes is going to be very, very hard to actually use. And for the final Druid card that I'm going to talk about, it's going to be Highborn Mentor. Battlecry, get a 2/2 pupil. Discover a spell that costs 7 or more from the past to teach it. Now, these are the cards that you can generate off of this. And since the pool is so small and it is only Druid cards, a lot of these have a lot of potential to be really strong. Scale of Onyxia gives Druid some AoE that is historically missing. Survival of the Fittest allows you to buff up all your minions to make them a little bit stickier. Ultimate Infestation lets you draw a bunch of cards while also getting a little bit of advantage. Now for Hunters, starting off with their Fable card, Ranger General Sylvanas, a Fabled Battlecry, deal 2 damage to all enemies. If you played Alira or Barissa, repeat for each, which means you can theoretically do 6 damage to everything, which is historically something Hunter really has been missing, especially if you can get additional copies. Alira, that Battlecry discover a spell, and it repeats if you've played either of her other sisters. And then we also have Barissa, which gives minions in your deck +1/+1, and then repeats. Overall, basically what you're going to be hoping to do is play the other 2 Windrunner sisters, then play Sylvanas last. And if you can get additional copies off of things like Scout or the Discover package, you might be able to do some weird, funky little OTK. And now, probably for the biggest hear me out legendary of the entire set, King Makla, a 4-cost beast Battlecry. Discard your hand, get a infinite banana. This is going to be a 1-cost spell that gives a minion +1/+1, and this stays in your hand. Now, the big hear me out is Lore Walker Show. I know it's a card that a lot of people have been wanting to see me do a deck with. However, honestly, between this card and Show, I think there might potentially be a very consistent Imbue Hunter list that focuses on locking your opponent out of the game completely by filling their hand with a bunch of bananas and making it where they can't do anything about it. Overall, do I think this deck is healthy for the game? No. But this is a card that you don't want to be meta. It's actually kind of worth noting that Hunter didn't get any true packages. They did get this location, which is Pass Silver Moon, which deals 5 damage to a random enemy minion. Then it advances, that deals 5 damage to a random minion, and then the excess hits the enemy hero. And then the last one hits the lowest health enemy minion and then hits the hero. Overall, I don't think this is quick enough to see too much play. We have here Precise Shot, which deals 3 damage. If it's exactly in the center of your hand, deal 5 instead. Theoretically, this won't be that hard to pull off, but it does kind of have a little bit of anti-synergy with some of the other 0 cards in hand Hunter lists that might exist in Wild. We got Wormhole Rewind, summon a random 3-cost beast. It attacks a random enemy. Really funny if you can actually generate Grom off of this. But outside of that meme, I don't think this one will see too much play. We have Untimely Death. Secret, whenever a friendly minion dies, the turn after being played, resummon it. Kind of cool if you want to try to make a taunt hunter list. We got a really good 1-drop in Quel'Thari Fletcher, a 1 attack 3 HP minion. Your hero power costs 0 if your hand has 3 or less cards. I think this condition is not really needed on the card, but I get what they're trying to go for here. Arrow Retriever, Battlecry, draw until your hand has 3 cards. Good as a top deck if your hand is empty, but outside of that. And finally, we have Ticking Time Bomb, destroy a random enemy minion. Probably, theoretically, potentially decent with the right support. Now for Priest, starting with Medivh the Hallowed, Fabled. Cost 0 if you control Karazhan, Battlecry, silence, and destroy all other minions. For 10 mana, this card is probably unplayable. However, in some weird, wacky Elise lists using Volin and Champions of Azeroth, you might be able to easily OTK thanks to Karazhan the Sanctum. Cost 0 if you're wielding Atesh, summon 2 random 8-cost minions. And then we finally have Atesh the Great Staff. Cost 0 if you control Medivh, double the damage and healing of your spells. Thus, theoretically, making it where you can get additional damage. So instead of being able to do like 258 damage with a full board of Volins, you should actually theoretically be able to do like 1,000 damage with a single hot coals. Overall, I think it might be slow, but it really has a lot of potential for at least me and the channel. The other legendary for Priest, we have Eternus, a Battlecry dragon. Take control of an enemy minion with this minion's health or less. Now, this is going to make sense once we get into the other cards. The next card is going to be Divine Augur. Battlecry, set the attack and health of every minion in your hand to the higher of those 2 stats. This card has a lot of potential for the Arcanos list that I uploaded last, since this would set the bird to a 6/6 for 3 mana, and if you have ways to buff up minions in your hand, such as some of these other cards of Power Word Barrier, give a character Divine Shield, give minions in your hand plus 2 health, making it even bigger and even harder to destroy. We also have Disciple of the Dub that has Battlecry, draw a minion, give minions in your hand plus 2 health. The only downside about this card in particular is it's another 3-cost minion that can't be played with Arcanos. However, we do have some other cards that are kind of interesting. We have Amber Priestess, Battlecry, restore health to a character equal to this minion's health. Theoretically, if we get a card that makes healing do damage, this could see potential in the future. We have Cease to Exist, Rewind, Silence, and destroy a random enemy minion. Theoretically, really frustrating to play against. Does also counter some of the big untargetable minions, such as Portola. But for the big combo, we have Intertwine Fate. Discover a copy of a card from your deck and one from your opponent's, which means you can get additional copies of key combo cards, and that makes it really good. Which is going to be Paladin, starting with Giblin of Tomorrow, a 8-cost mech with the battle cry. Put one of each aura from your deck into the battlefield. The two other cards that you'll be get here is Mechator Aura, which at the end of your turn give a random friendly minion +4/+4, and Divine Shield. And we also have Gnomish Aura, which restores 4 health to all of your characters. Now, if you know me, one of the decks that I'm most nostalgic about in Hearthstone's history is Secret Paladin. This is basically Secret Paladin's Mysterious Challenger, but for auras, which is a card that I was really hoping to see eventually printed. I will say this card costing 8 might make it a little bit too slow to see a lot of play, but I think potentially this has a lot of fun potential depending on how you want to do it, since you could theoretically infinitely increase the duration of all of your auras thanks to Cardboard Golem, which will be in rotation, which thankfully actually managed to get support before it rotated out of standard, because sometimes that sadly doesn't happen. Other really cool aura support in the set is going to be Manifest Timeways, Battlecry. If you control an aura, deal 3 damage to all enemies. This will probably end up seeing play in aggro lists too, just because of the fact that aggro paladin runs Crusader aura, and this does act as a way to destroy pesky taunts that your opponent might be dealing with. We also have Chronological aura at the end of your turn. Summon a 3/5 dragon with taunt. Lasts 3 turns for 5 mana. Probably costs a little bit too much, but there are ways to discount it, I think, in standard still. However, if you're a fan of more of the aggro paladin instead of the control list, we have Finn's Beyond Time, which is a battle cry. Replace your hand with your starting hand. Swap back at the end of your turn. Murloc that costs 2. This is really good for the aggro decks that empty out their hand real quickly, and they just need this as a way to refill it to refill the board. Overall, probably sees play there. We also do have Pass Gnome again, which is a 2-cost location that gives a minion +2/+1 and advance to the present. Then the next one gives it the Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero, and finally, it gives it Divine Shield, and then the other 2 effects. Honestly, as an aggro card, probably sees some type of play. Could theoretically be used with Ido and Troth as a way to get additional Divine Shields. And speaking of additional Divine Shields, we have Tank Engineer, a Divine Shield Death Rattle, summon a 7/7 taunt tank with Divine Shield, which is usually an 8-cost minion. Theoretically, this is good. I wish it had taunt. And we also have Hardlight Protector, which has Divine Shield. Battlecry, restore 3 health to your hero and give them Divine Shield, and as a mech. I think this has a potential once the 1-cost Divine Brew spell rotates out. Now for DK, starting with Talanji of the Graves. DK stealing another character from another class. A 4-cost Fabled minion with a Battlecry, draw Bashamdi, or resurrect him if he has died. Choose a boon to give him. And then Bashamdi is going to be a 6-cost Death Rattle minion. Summon a random 4-cost minion. Any boons given to Bashamdi carry over. And then we also have What Befell Sandalar, which deals 2 damage to all enemies. Choose a boon to give to Bashamdi. So theoretically, the idea here is you're going to want to give a boon to Bashamdi using What Befell, slam down Bashamdi, and then slam down Talanji in order to get him back, thus giving him a second one. Either you're going to give him Lifesteal, Taunt, or Rush, and then also make the minion summon from his Death Rattle cost 2 more. So theoretically, you can make his Death Rattle summon 10-cost minions. Overall, unless you can find additional ways to get additional copies of him, I don't know how consistently you're going to be wanting to run this. A cool Bashamdi support card here is Memoriam Manifest, a 4-cost shadow spell that summons the highest cost friendly undead that died this game, which will allow you to get Bashamdi out multiple times and trigger his Death Rattle multiple times. Though, this does not take the cake for the most interesting DK card of the set, Husk the Eternal Reaper. is a 4-cost undead battlecry. Give your hero death rattle. Spend up to 20 corpses to resurrect it with that much health. Now, this is the type of effect that I'm amazed it took this long for them to print for actual DK. Sure, it's a little bit of a worse ice block, but theoretically it could maybe allow you to stall out for an additional turn, and it also instantly completes your quest. Since you can run this in any DK list, you might as well run it in any type of list that you need to stall out for the late game. We got a life render battlecry. If your hero's health change this turn, deal 6 damage to an enemy minion. For 3 mana, this probably could see play just because there are enough weapons in DK for it to have potential, especially with Blood Draw. Discover a spell. This costs health instead of a mana, thus making it where you can easily combo both of these out on turn 3 and have some type of removal tool later on. We also have Time Stop, deal 3 damage, freeze 2 random enemy minions. Theoretically, I think we might end up reaching critical mass for DK and direct damaging spells for Frost DK to maybe make a OTK list viable, though I think it is missing a few non-direct damaging spell support cards to make the deck really, really strong. Aggro tools, we have Chrono Chiller, which is a 4-cost 8/7 undead. You no longer draw a card at the start of your turn. Just a really annoying minion for most classes to actually deal with, which will mean it sees play in aggro. And the last 2 cards that we're going to talk about for DK are Shadows of Yesterday, Rewind, summon 4 3/2 shades. They each gain 2 random bonus effects for 6 mana and costs 2 unholy runes to actually run. And then we also have Forgotten Millennium, which is an 8-cost spell. Fill your hand with random undeads. They cost health instead of mana this turn. Theoretically, both of these cards fit the exact same role. However, I think Shadows of Yesterday probably is better more consistently than the Forgotten Millennium, just because Millennium is a 8-cost card. Though, if you can randomly generate this and make it a lot cheaper through things like Elise, this might have potential there. All right, so that's the entire set. Let me know down below if there's any cards that I didn't really discuss that you are still excited to see. However, I think some of the more exciting cards for me are going to be the King Makla Legendary, just because I like to do stuff with memes. Rafaam is really cool, fits the flavor of the set real well. The only thing I'm kind of disappointed in is seeing no Rewind class. But honestly, given the animation, I'm not too sad about that, truth be told. Overall, there's a lot of fun little combos that we'll be able to do with almost every single class here. Like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.